Hello again. Welcome back to the Great Lakes Divide podcast with Tom Crawford. I'm Ryan Schuling. It's brought to you each and every week. The sound that you hear coming in, going out, the Record Lounge in Rio Town. Heather Frary, our proud sponsor, and we thank her for all of her musical selections, and you can check them out yourself in person. That's on South Washington in the Rio Town Marketplace, just south of I-496 in Lansing, the Record Lounge in Rio Town. You spin me right round, baby. Michigan State escapes on homecoming with a 40-31 win over the Indiana Hoosiers. Michael Penix Jr., an absolute nightmare, and I like this redshirt freshman quarterback. We'll talk about him in just a little bit. And Michigan absolutely obliterates Rutgers on their home field. Final score there, 52-0, and we'll talk about that game in the second half of our podcast as the Wolverines bounce back from that loss in Madison, and now will prepare for homecoming themselves against Iowa next Saturday. We bring in Tom Crawford. Tom, before we get into all of this, you were just telling me before we went to record this podcast, your travails from Ann Arbor back to East Lansing after the Michigan victory. You're trying to follow the Michigan State game. Take us from there.
Yeah, Ryan, sometimes you get a perspective check in life. I got one yesterday. My beloved Chevy Suburban, the 2005 Gem. I love that vehicle. It's only got 203,000 miles on it. It's just getting broken. But I'm driving back from Ann Arbor on US 23, and you know what that's like after a game. And this is well after the press conference. It's still congested. I'm going up, heading towards Brighton, and it's starting to slow down the traffic. And, I leave proper space in front of the vehicles in front of me, and all of a sudden I press the brake pedal, and it was barely slowing this 6,600-pound vehicle down, and I, just hope and pray to hit that floorboard with a brake, and I was able to slow it down enough. There was enough juice in the brake lines. I mean, I had leakage all over the place underneath later on, and avoided an accident, puddled into the park and ride up in Brighton on Lee Road exit, and just sat there and listened to the Michigan State game as just a release of, hey, life is good. And I don't care if it takes 2 hours for AAA to get here to tow my vehicle, the Tuffy Auto Service Centers in Lansing. I don't care. All is good. And so, hey, count your blessings. And that was one indeed. And got to visualize what was going on at Spartans Stadium throughout that, particularly the second half. Going through and them pulling that victory out.
Well, glad you're okay, Tom. What about your vehicle? Is it drivable again or no?
Well, I had to have it towed in a flatbed truck back to Lansing, and then my wife came and picked me up in Brighton. But no, I gotta get that thing remedied on Monday. That thing is not safe to drive 10 feet. There's no way of stopping it. It's a big vehicle.
So Tom's brakes blow out on his vehicle, and Michigan State's brakes blow out on their defense. This turned into a hair on fire experience.
What is it with that secondary, Ryan? This is unbelievable.
Well, 40-31, the final, Tom, and we're going to touch on that first because what drove me nuts, absolutely bonkers and crazy about this game was exactly what you said. Poor Josiah Scott, normally good, as Stephen A. Smith would say, normally good, but he was torched in this game repeatedly, and that's not to let David Dowell or Xavier Henderson or Josh Butler off the hook, but this was just pitch and catch. It was like a recreational recess for an elementary school. Keep away. Michael Penix Jr., Whop Fillier, and to clarify for those of you who get racially offended by the name Whop, let me clarify that. The story is young Mr. Fillier was nicknamed Whop, W-H-O-P, because when he was a kid, he loved eating Whoppers from Burger King. And so his mom dubbed him Whop. That's his name. That's what he goes by. Just a little kind of a preclusive message there. But he had 14 grabs for 142 yards, 2 scores. Donovan Hale with 1 big grab.
That one grab was unbelievable. That one-hand job?
One-handed, 7 catches, 99 yards. Those two combined for almost 250 yards. But here's the thing, Tom, and I want to start here. Maybe you visualized it. Maybe you saw the highlights later. But for Penix, we knew this was going to be a problem matchup for Michigan State, much more so than Ramsey. And what I saw from the redshirt freshman tells me he is going to be a star in this league. He's got great vision, great presence in the pocket, great touch on his throws. And as he showed late in the game, he can throw it deep too. But all too often, early and throughout this game, they were getting Michigan State on little swing routes, to the outside, maybe pick plays. They were borderline, but MSU kept laying back. Mike Tressel, I don't understand this, in coverage on the corners, in soft coverage, giving about a 10-yard cushion rather than coming up, pressing these receivers, trusting your help deep, and making them beat you, because it was time and again, Tom, it was like a nightmare watching this over and over and over. Penix would just throw these short darts to the outside, high percentage passes. The receivers would get a block, and boom, there they go. And Michigan State fell victim to this, fell for the banana in the tailpipe over and over again.
Ryan, the thing about Michigan State that we looked upon going into the season, well, the offense is going to be struggling, but that defense is such a constant at all three levels. And granted, Michigan State is still difficult to run the football, but, man, all you have to do is throw on them. I cannot believe what a sieve this secondary has become for Michigan State. And if their defense starts to let them down, because their offense is going to be inconsistent. It's just that's just how it's wired, particularly against a good defense. They're in a whole peck of trouble if they don't fix this secondary. I'm telling you that right now. Next week looks daunting is a nice word. We'll just leave it at that.
Oh, man, you put it kindly. At Ohio State with what the Buckeyes just did to Nebraska, and I called that. I did not think that would be a close game at all. And Ohio State goes in like that's a home game, and they trounce Nebraska. It wasn't even a contest, and that's been the case basically for every game they've played this year. You're right. If Michigan State is going to have a hope, a prayer, even a Hail Mary's chance of going in there and being competitive, a lot has to change on their side of the football. And unfortunately, like you said, I'm thinking, you look against Michigan or Ohio State's offense and what Justin Fields is able to do through the air. My goodness gracious. I mean, this secondary's got to come up with some answers. And I don't know how you do that. If you put an extra DB back there with a nickel, then you don't want to be exposed by the running game. If you drop a linebacker back in coverage, and Antoine Simmons, I thought had a very good game. He had 2.5 quarterback hurries. This guy, you and I talked about him before the season, Tom.
We did.
As a catalyst type guy along with Bocce in that linebacking core, and he really is proving us right.
Well, yeah, and he's probably because, he's the name that teams don't focus on. I mean, they think of Joe Bocce, Kenny Willekes and those types. But, yeah, he is stepping up. But, boy, they need more of his type of performances to remedy the situation on defense. And, yeah, we'll get into Ohio State probably more on our Wednesday podcast, Ryan, as far as what that's going to pose. But I'm telling you what, when Michigan State goes against a team that can run and throw and just flat out run like Ohio State can run, and Wisconsin would be in that situation too, because they can play action and throw the ball. They're going to find out exactly what they're all about these next 2 weeks.
I said Simmons 2.5 quarterback hurries. It was 2.5 tackles for loss. I want to clarify that. And that they only had a couple of quarterback hurries in this game. And Penix was able to roll out, get out of trouble, sidestep, run when he had to. They only sacked him once, but it was a big sack by Raekwon Williams. I mean, I gave my thoughts on Penix. I want to get yours, Tom. He was 33 of 42 through the air. I think he completed something like 20 passes consecutively, 286 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. Also, again, he's able to run the ball, but was the one sack, I think, took away any rushing yardage. He didn't have to throw it because, again, these high percentage passes to the outside, short and sweet. Indiana kept it simple on offense, and it worked for them a good deal of the day, and he was a big part of it.
Well, short and sweet and short and quick. I mean, Indiana, to me, kind of did to Michigan State what Indiana did to Michigan the last 2 years prior to the Ohio State game, gave them a template to how to attack their defense, and that's the quick throw. He quick throws everywhere, and Tressel's got to figure out how to defend that quick throw, I think, or else this was basically a clinic in my mind of how to do it. And Indiana has that way about them of dissecting and setting up the next opponent. And I'm sure Ohio State will be licking their chops. I mean, they'll say it eloquently all week, and they'll talk about how Michigan State is tough. And Michigan State is a tough team. But, man, when you can't get to the quarterback, wow, then he's going to carve you up. And Penix is – this kid, you're not understating it. I think this kid is going to be really, really good before he's done.
And it did help. I think you're right that Michigan State was only able to sack him the one time. I think that's what surprised me the most, that they were so frustrated in trying to get pressure on him, make him uncomfortable. And a lot of that is, like you said, quick out routes will solve the problem that you have for an offensive line, even if it's struggling. We've said that about Michigan State in the recent past, but they were not able really to win that battle at the line of scrimmage to get to Penix, to make his life difficult. And he really had his way for a good portion of this game.
Yeah, the fact that Indiana came, was down and kept fighting back.
Mm-hmm.
When you thought that Michigan State was going to take command of the game, and there were a couple plays like that defensive holding call that, remember, Indiana forced the Brian Lewerke fumble, and they recovered, but there was a holding call on that. That could have flipped that game right then. I mean, there were a lot of ifs, ands, and buts in this game. Michigan State is extremely fortunate to win, but hey, that marks a good team. They found a way to win, and they went aggressive to close out and win in regulation after IU had tied it.
Yeah, and IU had taken the lead, of course, 24-21 early in the fourth quarter, and then the fourth quarter went absolutely nuts. We'll get to Michigan State's side of the football now. You mentioned a couple of pivotal plays, and you just hit on one of them, the Lewerke fumble. He's got to be more careful with the football in that regard. It's the second time this season that he's scrambled. He's tried to buy more time. It's gotten chaotic in the pocket. He gets out, and then he exposes the football. It gets loose. They get bailed out by that holding call against Indiana. But one other play that I thought this game was going to turn on was a well-executed, well-called play by Brad Salem. It was a sneaky little play action to Anthony Williams. Lewerke rolls right to throw. It would have been a wide-open screen.
Oh, yes,
green spaces,
yep.
And Williams drops the football, and that continues to be something that plagues Michigan State. I can think back once again. You look at Cody White had a big drop. I think one of the tight ends had a drop for Michigan State. I mean, with the narrow margin for error on offense for the Spartans, they can't afford to have these unforced errors like drops.
Well, and also an overthrow. I mean, Cody White, I think when State went ahead with a field goal and they could have had the touchdown, Cody White was wide open, and Lewerke overthrew him. And he's making both. From an execution standpoint, either something's breaking down, and you're only good as your weakest link. So either a receiver's making a drop, or Lewerke does the overthrow, and so they really need to get into the execution mode of their offense. I think schematically it's all there. You know what I mean? When these plays are there, they're just not being executed. So, that's what Michigan State has to focus on this next couple weeks.
Two stats that jump off the page at me from a team perspective. Penalties against Indiana. They had 9 for 85. Michigan State wasn't too bad, 6 for 61. But time of possession through the short passing game kept the Michigan State defense on the field. Mark D'Antonio had to call a timeout at one point just to give his defense a breather. Check out time of possession. 34-20 for Indiana, 25-40 for Michigan State, nearly 9 more minutes with the football for the Hoosiers. And for Tom Allen, you saw his spirited reaction on the sidelines. He kept his team motivated. He kept his team believing. They were loose on the sidelines. For all the criticism that we hear coming Allen's way, I thought this was a very well-coached football game for the most part by the Hoosiers.
Yeah, and once again, you grab optics and draw conclusions. So I watched a lot of the Indiana game when Ohio State went in and carved them up at Memorial Stadium in Bloomington, and I'm thinking, God, they're Indiana all over again. No, Ohio State is just being a juggernaut. Maybe Indiana it was more that Ohio State was that good.
Yeah.
Maybe Indiana has some spunk to them. So watch out for the Hoosiers going through the rest of the season. Tom Allen is up against, his back is against the wall in terms of, I think, preserving his job. And even though it's winning in Indiana is not the hugest priority there is in the world in football, but I would think that they would be a team to watch out for.
After Ohio State did what they did to Nebraska and Lincoln, and people who were high on Nebraska coming into this season with Scott Frost putting that program together finally, but I agree with you 100%. That was more about how good Ohio State is than how bad maybe Indiana was, because the Hoosiers, I think, can be a middle-of-the-pack team in the Big Ten. They couldn't run the football. You mentioned this earlier, Tom. Michigan State's rush defense still very solid. Stevie Scott, not really a big factor in the ground game. 18 carries, 66 yards, 3.7 per carry. But this was the same story on the other side of the football, as Elijah Collins never really broke loose. His longest run was for 19, 17 carries, 56 yards, 3.3 yards per carry. But lo and behold, here comes Brian Lewerke. He combines for almost 400 yards. He throws for 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. He runs for 78 yards. He finds the daylight. This is the Brian Lewerke we saw 2 seasons ago, the season that ended with 10 wins and the Holiday Bowl win, 12 carries, 78 yards. And the most important stat on Brian Lewerke so far this season, Tom, that I think tells a lot, 10 touchdown throws, 1 interception. He's much better. Decisions in the pocket, not forcing the football, and maybe this is just because he's physically healthy.
Well, yeah, that has a lot to do with it. I think being damaged goods last year had a lot to do with it. I mean, he's a one-armed soldier out there. So I think Lewerke's in for a good season moving forward, and I think he's not the problem at Michigan State. They have to obviously get a more consistent running game going, and then now all of a sudden they have this newfound problem, the secondary on defense.
Yeah, the secondary for Michigan State, I think we started to see cracks a little bit against Arizona State, and in the defense.
Yep. At winning time. When you can't deliver at winning time, that 75-yard drive sticks in my mind when I think about that Arizona State had. That sticks in my mind that I can't get out of my mind when I think about Michigan State's defense.
And let's go to something maybe that's not just X's and O's that we're watching on the field, which is a big part of it. If you go back and watch the video, you see why Josiah Scott was just he had a bad day. People have bad days. But something that can help fix that or turn it around in a hurry, Tom, is leadership, calm on the defense, and how much maybe the secondary misses a guy, a calming presence like Khari Willis.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, he was an incredible player for them last year in terms of leadership and obviously precision on the field. So, yeah, they're missing that. They have to have that person that guy back there is going to have to be identified, and he's got to follow through on that role. And that starts up with Joe Bacci, leading, who's just an absolute fundamental leader on that team, and spill that into the secondary that, everybody's accountable and you got to get your job done.
Yeah, I almost think, and again, we'll get more into this in next week's preview of Michigan State, Ohio State, but watching this performance and the rather mediocre run game that MSU had, I'm talking about with their running backs. Collins was the bell cow, but had 1 touchdown, didn't really bust loose in this game. They'll need to have better balance on offense, no doubt, in Columbus, but they still have the receiving core. Darrell Stewart has another big game, 5 catches, 117 yards, 2 touchdowns, and I'm really starting to like Matt Seibert. This is a guy that kind of came out of nowhere. Everybody's thinking Matt Dotson's going to be the starting tight end and maybe the leader in that kind of a unit, but Seibert had the touchdown grab over the middle. He seems to have good instincts, and I really believe that for Michigan State to have success on offense, Lewerke has to have that safety valve option over the middle in the form of a tight end, and I think that could be Seibert.
Well, absolutely. Then you can break your attack zone into three vertical parts, and the tight end drag over the middle. What a perfect play that is for Brian Lewerke, that safety valve, that old cliche. And yeah, absolutely. And that drops kill you. Drops are like little mini turnovers, I think. It would be, especially in 3rd and 8, and you had a first down, and the tight end drops it. If they can get that part of their offense, they're going to be pretty productive through the air.
Yeah, Matt Conklin, again, a little bit shaky, had that missed field goal early. They trust him late. It's basically what amounts to an extra point. I think Michigan State and Mark D'Antonio played that correctly to run down the clock, get the touchdown, and have that touchdown lead and get the field goal that ultimately would prove to be the difference in this game. And the fumble recovery touchdown, that was kind of icing on the cake, but that was off a trick play. Indiana's got just a few seconds remaining trying to throw it around, but the Spartans escape from their own stadium with the 40-31 win. And I'm looking at them at home. Yeah, they had the big win against Western Michigan, but the win against Tulsa and East Lansing, not impressive. They lost to Arizona State in East Lansing 10-7. They go on the road and play probably their best all-around game of the season against Northwestern.
Yeah.
And at home on homecoming, Tom, they're not that great overall. They're very inconsistent against Indiana. What's the deal with Michigan State on their own home turf? They don't play their best football there.
No, they don't. But I think with Michigan State, I mean, this is what I pulled from Michigan State in the last couple of years. Just expect the unexpected. I mean, when you think this goes back to that game when they went into Columbus and Connor Cook was hurt. Oh my God, they got no shot at winning this game, and they pulled it off with Tyler O'Connor as a backup quarterback. Expect the unexpected. When you think Michigan State has got it going on, they look like crap. And when and then when you think, oh, they're down in the dump, and then they deliver. I mean, they'll probably, just the way this pattern goes, and they're not going to win next Saturday, but maybe they'll play a lot better than we expected to. I mean, that's kind of the way the pattern goes. And maybe being away from home and the distractions at home, and you got all these bands people. I don't know what goes on with Michigan State at home if they get overconfident, but man, they have struggled at home. You're right.
And if they're going to pull off a shocker, like you mentioned, going back to 2015, which led to, of course, their playoff appearance ultimately, it's got to be something unconventional that happens in this game. They've got to come up with some, little giants, tricks in the book. Let it all hang out because, like you said, you've seen what Ohio State's done to every other team on their schedule. So, I mean, I think Brian Lewerke's confidence coming out of this Indiana game is one thing that they can hang their hats on. He looked very much in control. His composure very, very high. When things went sideways, he didn't. Again, a good overall performance combined for him running and throwing the football. This is, I think, again, the Brian Lewerke from 2 years ago, and they're going to need him because this offensive line, this is the nightmare for me, Tom. If they can't run the football against Indiana, think about going up against that front seven for Ohio State. I mean, it's giving me nightmares already.
Well, Chase Young is becoming one of the great defensive players in the country, if not the best. I mean, he is a dominant player, number 2 there for Ohio State. And if they don't keep him out of Lewerke's face, it's going to be it could get ugly. And it could get ugly real quick. Because Brian Lewerke is one of those great guys. He's a good rhythm guy, like all good quarterbacks. When he gets in a rhythm and then he feels confident, he can run out of the pocket and do some damage. Unless they get into that rhythm, I mean, it's going to be a Buckeye romp, I'm thinking.
So a 40-31 win for Michigan State. They'll take it. Hey, a win is a win. But again, the big takeaways for Tom and I in this game are the struggles of the secondary and the emergence, once again, of Brian Lewerke. And I think, again, all due respect to Michael Penix Jr., this is a good football player. And Michigan fans out there that might be kind of snickering, Michigan has to go down to Bloomington this year late in the season. And it's always, Tom, you know this, it always is, it's kind of like what Michigan State had yesterday. It's always interesting when the Wolverines and the Hoosiers get together for some reason.
Well, when I made my preseason projection of 11-1, and I guess I'll stick with 11-1. I mean, until it becomes 10-2, winning that second loss. I had that one loss for Michigan was down in Bloomington.
Yes, you did.
Because they had not beaten the Hoosiers had not beaten the Wolverines since 1987. At a game I attended, a monsoon down there. I figured, hey, it's just about time. I don't have any educated guesses on that. I'm just hunches, if you will, that Indiana was going to get it done. It's a scary Indiana team right now, I think, with this quarterback. You get a good quarterback who can do the things he can do in a tough environment. Spartan Stadium is a hard place to win. We know that. And he didn't seem intimidated at all what transpired there in East Lansing.
No, and when he started throwing the deep ball the way that he could and the way that he did and the way that Indiana almost got this game, that proved to me everything I needed to know about the young man. Again, just a redshirt freshman. So have fun with that, Wolverines. Michigan State improves to 4-1 on the season. They pull one out of the fire, 40-31 over the Hoosiers on homecoming. They'll head to Columbus. That'll be a Saturday start, 7:30 nighttime game on ABC next weekend. The Great Lakes Divide podcast is brought to you by the Record Lounge in Rio Town. All the great classics, all the new music. Every Friday, Heather Frary has it for you. And if she doesn't have it, she will special order it for you and get it within 24 to 48 hours. Great personal service. Support local business on South Washington in the Rio Town Marketplace, just south of I-496 in Lansing. That's the Record Lounge in Rio Town. Well, Tom and I got both of our predictions wrong. We said that Michigan State would cover at home on homecoming over Indiana. They most certainly did not. And we thought that Michigan would win, and fairly easily, but a 27.5-point spread was a lot of points to cover. Well, the Wolverines did that and then some in a completely dominant performance, 52-0, 52 card pickup over the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. And Jim Harbaugh had this to say about his team's turnaround from the Madison nightmare the week before.
should be encouragement to them. You just when you're down, your back's against the wall. I mean, you got to come out. You got to come out and fight. You got to sustain. You got to do all. You got to work harder. You got to work smarter. You got to be tougher, mentally and physically. And it's the only way to do it, in our opinion. And they really set themselves to doing that. And so that's 1 week, and now you go about doing it another week. But I thought it was excellent job by coaches, by players, special teams. Chris Partridge, amazing job he did. Don Brown and the entire defense and entire defensive coaching staff and players. Great play, great shutout, great calls by Don. Josh Gattis, all the offensive coaches and offensive players. The precision they had, I mean, they improved and it showed, and put together a really good game plan, and players knew it, and it was coached, it was executed, it was so there was a lot of trust there. There was a lot of trust, players trusting their coaches trusting the players, and a lot of work. And it's good to see it pay off in a victory that was much needed.
So, Tom, you were there. Early signs in this game that told you this is going to be a big day for the Wolverines.
They didn't turn the ball over on the first possession.
That helps, doesn't it?
How's that for starters?
That's nice.
They went down and scored a touchdown.
Yeah.
Now, I tweeted about this. If you have a headache, you have a fever, you take 2 aspirins and you get well real quick. And if you're coming off an embarrassing loss in Madison, you play Rutgers and you get well real quick. And Rutgers is a very, very poor football team. Ryan, they are pathetic. I mean, Rutgers in the last 3 years has fewer wins in the Big Ten than Eastern Michigan does. How bad is that? So 476 yards of total offense for Michigan, $152 for Rutgers. And, Shea had protection. Obviously, he used all his arsenal. They jumped on him. They got it's everything you wanted to do. But you end every sentence, and I have these conversations with my Michigan cohorts after the game, and we finished all of our sentences with the words, but it was Rutgers. But it was Rutgers. I mean, it's always that perspective. And so you really don't know what to expect moving forward. But they did what they had to do, and it was a convincing win. And this is what they need to do. They need to blow out who they're supposed to blow out. And so probably their best performance of the year. We really find out what Michigan has next week. Granted, it's at home, and they should beat Iowa. And when I say what we think we're going to expect, I mean, what we want to expect is not just beat Iowa, but beat them physical. Then I know that Michigan is back in order and it can make a decent run at this.
2 things that stand out to me before we get to more sound from the postgame that Tom collected on the Wolverines is we should have known better. This is Chris Ash, who opened his big mouth about Harbaugh's recruiting in New Jersey a few years ago, you remember. And so Jim Harbaugh will spare no quarter for Rutgers ever. And we talk about Tom Allen, Indiana, okay, but Chris Ash at Rutgers, what stood out to me about this game most of all, the Scarlet Knights got absolutely pounded up front in the trenches, both sides of the ball. They couldn't run the football. They couldn't stop the run. They couldn't lay a hand on Shea Patterson. He had all day in the pocket. At what point do you think Chris Ash at Rutgers, his job is in jeopardy?
Well, I think it's in jeopardy at the end of this year. I mean, his teams are not competing. And, they're getting humiliated. And who knows what's going to be down the pike for them this year. I mean, they had a Boston College who lost to Kansas at home. Kansas' first road game like ever. I mean, in decades. And BC takes that loss and goes in and beats Rutgers by, double digits in Piscataway. I mean, this is a bad football team. And I hate saying that and being negative, but I hate seeing coaches get fired. But I'm surprised Chris Ash, coming from Ohio State, has not done a better job. but this is just not working out. They need to take a different direction, I think, by the season's end.
Couple of stories coming out of the televised portion of this broadcast, which I'm not sure if you've been able to go back and watch that yet, Tom, because you were there in person. But Matt Millen was the color commentator. I thought he made some good points on Raheem Blackshear, this poor young man who's a tremendous player. He led them again in receiving out of the backfield, but he's got nobody around him. He's got no talent around him, really.
Right. No, and that's that one household name we talk about. I mean, Blackshear, is a guy that probably could be a relevant player on the other 13 teams in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're just set. He's just set up to fail. There's nothing there. The only thing about this game that concerns me, and when you win 52-0, what went wrong here? I thought Michigan would be able to get chunk plays on the running game against Rutgers, and they did not. Yeah, they got a $141 total, but this is the worst rush defense team, one of the worst in the country. In fact, when you look at the stats and the NCAA stats going into this game, Rutgers is in the 100 and beyond in literally every category, both sides of the ball. The fact that Michigan couldn't get chunk plays running off this Rutgers team, that concerns me a little bit when they're playing, obviously, some really good defensive team against the rush moving forward.
Yeah, the Michigan defense, there was no question here. They absolutely held Rutgers in check. A shutout performance, just 152 total yards surrendered, 46 on the ground. Michigan's own running game, to Tom's point, though, had 141 yards. That's not a bad day, but Christian Turner gets the bulk of the carries, 11 for 48. Hassan Haskins, 9 for 45. And Zach Charbonnet just 5 for 22. When you look at that distribution of carries, Tom, is there something wrong with Zach Charbonnet that I don't know about?
Well, he was bunged up a little bit going into the whiskey game. I'm not sure where that is going, but it's not so much of who's carrying the ball. It's what the gaping holes there that I wanted to see against this pathetic Rutgers that D-line were not there. That concerns me, particularly when I see, in comparison, and maybe I'm caught up in this Ohio State thing, of how cavernous these holes are in their RPO, and they can get their running game going to set up their pass. Some people say, hey, throw the ball to set up the run. I'm still going to be one of those old school guys. You run the ball to set up the pass. And I know Michigan, wanted to run the football, but they defaulted to the aerial game, and that was productive, obviously. With Shea Patterson having a good game to a lot of different receivers, but they're going to get this running game fixed, I think. And next week, hugely problematic against Iowa.
Yeah, Patterson was sharp, 17 for 23, only 6 incompletions on the day, 276 yards, a touchdown, did have an interception, but one of the big changes that Michigan made was putting Josh Gattis, their offensive coordinator, on the sideline to call plays, to communicate. Brad Salem is doing that for Michigan State. And Jim Harbaugh talked about that move in this clip right here.
That as well. It was seeing a lot of good offensive play in practice. And we've seen, that in practice. You want to see it in games. And we have seen it in games at times. And at times not, but I would agree with Shea that it felt more like that, because that's it's more the way it runs in practice. I thought it was also really good for substitutions. We've been having some such substitution errors in the first 3 games, and for Josh to be there as the plays getting formulated, he can react to the kind of subs that he wants in the game, who he wants running what particular route or play. So that it flowed much better today. It can still be better, the operation and the mechanics of it, but I thought it took a big leap today.
So, Tom, discuss for a little bit what this does for Michigan, having Gattis on the sideline and just his first year calling plays, and why it took maybe to this point in the season after Wisconsin for that decision to be made.
Well, and Jim talked about this after the game. It was kind of a joint decision. They kind of went to each other and said, hey, yeah, it's time. And I don't understand why this didn't happen before, because one of the greatest strengths of Josh Gattis, when you talk to the players about, is how vibrant he is in practice and how enthusiastic he is and, engaged he was. And I had my binoculars on him during the game, because one of those games that, you really have to focus on what's going on in the field. We know the verdict of this game real early on. And he's real engaging. He is up and down. He is chatting up his team when the defense is out there. He's just getting, he's connecting with every player on that offense, and even the two deeps on it. So I really think that was something missing. I'm surprised it didn't happen early, and I'm surprised that more teams don't do that. I know you want the aerial shot up there, but you got other players who can, or other coaches rather, who can voice that overhead scheme to the OC, and the OC can call the right play. But I think that this is the right way to go, and I think it's going to stay engaged that way, that Gattis is on the sideline moving forward.
And, Tom, I'm going to talk about the passing game for Michigan, and, again, just what Shea Patterson's comfort level is. And this is so analogous in many ways, in my opinion, to Michigan State based on expectations coming in and what reality is. You have Donovan Peoples-Jones. He had 4 catches, 62 yards. Nico Collins had 2 for 59, including one big one for 48. He had a touchdown. Tariq Black had a couple grabs. But as Darryl Stewart is to Michigan State, just that reliable, safe go-to option. He's like comfort food. I would say the same thing about Ronnie Bell. 6 catches, 83 yards, and I don't know whether it's skill or talent matches up exactly what Darryl Stewart is, but his role on this offense certainly is very similar to D. Stew's role on Michigan State's offense. What is it about Ronnie Bell that stands out to you?
He gets open. I mean, this is why people are saying, why was, against Wisconsin, why was Shea going to Ronnie Bell so much? Well, because he was getting separation. And sometimes, when I do the ISO thing on the binoculars and I look at a Nico Collins, Tariq Black, and DPJ is just getting back into it, but sometimes they're not getting separation. And Ronnie Bell seems to find a way to get open. He could have had a more productive year thus far. He made a couple of drops earlier in the season. But he's right. He's that go-to guy he's almost like a safety valve in some regards. And so from a passing receiver, standpoint, they're in pretty good shape. Like I said, so with a lot of options to go. And Sean McEwen at the tight end is another option as well. So he's got plenty to throw to. He's just Shea's got to be precise in that and do what he did against Rutgers, against good teams, and obviously protect the football.
And Tom and I discussed this in the last podcast. This was a big game for Shea Patterson because when I asked Tom last week who he'd rather have at quarterback, he said if healthy, Dylan McCaffrey, give him a shot, make this his proving ground game to get ready for Iowa. So I think in many ways, mostly for himself, Shea Patterson needed to have a game like he had on Saturday. And here's Shea talking about the difference between his performance against Wisconsin and the team's performance against Rutgers.
Just going to play our game, not thinking too much, not worried about anything, just going out there and playing the way we knew how to play. And, I think we showed that, today and a little bit. I wish we could have a couple throws back, but, just going out there confident with a chip on our shoulder.
So the big question for me to you then, Tom, is what you saw from Shea Patterson. Was it enough to give you kind of a calming feeling like, okay, this kid's got it, we're okay going forward?
Well, I think Michigan's okay moving forward from the quarterback position as a whole. And the reason I say that, if Shea can't get it done, and I'm not sure with the situation with Dylan McCaffrey coming out of the concussion protocol, coming off that whiskey game, where his situation is. But you have him, and obviously Joe Milton, granted it was a mop-up time, but he throws a nice ball. Mm-hmm. And he threw a touchdown pass, late in the game. And so I think they're fine at quarterback. It's just the other things that I'm concerned about. The run blocking and getting a running game going. That's the biggest issue for Michigan offensively, as opposed to who's under center.
Yeah, I was very impressed by Shea Patterson and happy for him based on all the slings and arrows he'd been taking of late, that he was able to deliver such a clutch performance. It was very consistent in this game. Now, granted, again, it's against Rutgers, and he had all day in the pocket to throw, but he did what he needed to do. And you mentioned Joe Milton. I think, and I want to get your perspective on this, if it was even brought up in the post-game press conference, Tom, when we see Milton come in and no Dylan McCaffrey at all at any point in this game, it tells me that he didn't pass concussion protocol, that he wasn't available for this game. Milton, a lot of bright lights down the track, I think, for the future of Michigan at the position with him. But was there any mention of McCaffrey's status after this game?
No, it wasn't. And, I feel, it's like we were all guilty of not asking that question, although you're not going to probably get a concrete answer like any coach on injury situation. But, this kid, Milton, when you stand next, he's a big kid.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's like 6'5". He's like 250 pounds. I mean, he's a big kid. He's got good range, and he's got a good arm, and his legs are decent. So that'll be interesting to see if McCaffrey – the thing of it is, if there was something serious about the situation of his status moving forward, I think we would have heard about it. It trickles, and we're not seeing that trickling of negative news about Dylan McCaffrey. So I think that's a good sign.
We certainly wish the best for Dylan McCaffrey and, of course, his father, Ed. I buy his brown mustard all the time here at King Supers in Denver. That's where the family resides, and they're a big presence here in this community as well. One other question on the offense. You mentioned your concerns about the running game, Tom, their inability to execute. But let's just strictly break it down skeleton-wise into play calling from the sideline by Josh Gattis. What did you think of the game plan, the approach, what he intended to do, the plays that he called in this game, and how Michigan attacked Rutgers?
Well, I think it was, they ran some corner routes where, I mean, they went aggressive. I thought it was a good play calling. I was just, like I said before, I was disappointed that when they did run, they couldn't get bigger plays, because I thought as effective as they were throwing the football and obviously protecting and not having a turnover, that we would have saw some gaping holes, in terms of running. But no, I think it's a good mix. I think it's going to get better. I think there's a lot of transition. Even the Don Brown's defense, Michigan has a lot of young players who are trying to grasp all this knowledge, and I think it's a tough learn. And I think we're going to see more productivity when you get more comfort zone from a lot of these young players.
Again, Michigan 52-0 winners at home over Rutgers in what amounts to a tune-up game for Iowa and homecoming. That'll be next Saturday, noon start on Fox. And what you can't necessarily read from the stats in this game, although the numbers are impressive for Michigan's defense, is how uncomfortable Artur Sitkowski was. And I thought it was ironic during this broadcast. I learned this for the first time. Sitkowski visited Michigan, Tom, and I think
he did.
He was offered a scholarship by Jim Harbaugh, but he chose Rutgers to stay closer to home. What's wrong with this kid?
No, you know what it is. It's about opportunity.
Yeah.
I mean, Jack Cohen from Wisconsin came to Michigan's camp, the Wisconsin quarterback, and they went after him. And I think he just saw, I mean, when Michigan's recruiting these top-notch quarterbacks, and they have more in the hopper coming forward that have been signed for the 2020, I think I think kids look at, they want to play. And they want to see what's a fit for them. It's not necessarily, hey, let's get on the best team and see what happens. I mean, they want to be productive themselves, and I think that was the case. And Harbaugh spoke highly of that kid, and obviously he wanted him. But I mean, when you don't have any help from your friends, you're just going to get set up to fail, and that was the case.
Well, I mean, you can see all the way at the top of the food chain at Alabama. If you can be promised certain things as a recruit, Jalen Hurts, does that name ring a bell? And now he's doing it for Oklahoma in a transfer. We've seen transfers.
He could win Heisman. I mean, he's that good. He's awesome right now at OU. It's all about fit. You're right. Good point.
And we've seen transfers from Clemson at the quarterback position. So it's everywhere. It's top down in college football. And so, Sitkowski gets offered. Maybe he's going to be fourth string behind Dylan McCaffrey and Joe Milton. Then you don't want to do that. You want to go where you can start. And he did. And he only had 4.4 yards per pass. And in this game, Michigan, this number surprised me. They only had 2 sacks. They did have 4 quarterback hurries. One of those was from Cam McGrone, and this is his talking about the game and his role in it.
Last season I had a great opportunity to watch Devin Bush play every Saturday. I took a little bit from his game. Show my speed a little bit. Show my power. So being behind Devin Bush definitely helped me for this season.
So what I'm liking about this Michigan defense, among many things, Tom, is the depth, the quality of that depth, and the ability of that depth to step in, make plays like a Cam McGrone, who's not listed as a starter on the depth chart, gets his opportunity, makes some impact plays. On defense for the Wolverines, what are your thoughts coming out of this game?
Well, 2 kids, and Cam McGrone is one. I'm going to mention the other one too. Jackson Hill on special teams, number 30, the heralded freshman 5-star. These are 2 5-stars. Cam McGrone was when he came out of Indianapolis, a couple years ago. Last year he was a true freshman. He was the top, I think, by 24/7, maybe a couple other platforms. He was like the top outside linebacker in the country. And what you saw with Cam McGrone is you saw just speed flying at you. And that's what you want to do. That's what the great teams have. And he had a lot of quarterback hurries, if you will. He didn't have I don't think he had many tackles, but his presence is definitely there. And the same thing with Daxton Hill. If you're going to get him on the field, then you got that sheer talent, that Ohio State caliber talent that Michigan's going to need on defense if they want to compete with the big boys.
Well, and a big name that everybody knows who had, I thought, an outstanding performance was Kwity Paye up front. He had 3.5 tackles for loss on his own, 1.5 sacks, creating havoc. This guy's a matchup nightmare, really, for any offensive line. What did you see out of him? What can Michigan do to complement him more, get more of a pass rush going? Because he certainly stood out on paper and on TV.
Well, not to be the riverboat gambler here, but I mean, when you have a Cam McGrone blitzing like he did, I mean that then they got to worry about that situation. Then a Kwity Paye can do his work from inside, and or defensive end, and he number 19. Keep your eye on him. I mean, they move him all over the place. And Aiden Hutchinson is another kid who continues to get better. Jim Harbaugh goes on and on about Aiden Hutchinson. So I think there's some parts there defensively that Michigan fans can get excited about. But still, what still sticks in our minds when you think about that defensive line is how they dealt with that physicality of Wisconsin. So when you go against that, a tough offensive line, and Iowa would be considered in that category, just by reputation alone, they have a physical offensive line. How are they going to do against a physical offensive line again the next game? Obviously, when you're playing Michigan State or more physical teams, Michigan State, Ohio State, Penn State on the road, we saw what they did to Maryland. There's some really tall tasks that are going to challenge this defense moving forward to see how good Don Brown's unit can be.
So Michigan, an easy winner in this one, 52-0, sets up for that homecoming matchup next week against Iowa. Jerry Springer, final thought. Tom, your takeaways from each of these two games.
Well, for Michigan, let's stick with them for right now. And I was talking to John U. Bacon about this homecoming game. Homecoming is supposed to be the game you're supposed to mop up and send the old alums home happy. The most important homecoming game I can recall in recent memory at Michigan Stadium. So it's time now to deliver. And then get that conquered, and then prove it on the road. Not so much at Illinois, but you got to play well there. But when they go on October 19th to Happy Valley, finally get a top 20 road win. So it sets up. Everything is set up perfectly for Michigan moving forward to prove their worth and get that nasty taste of Madison out of their mind. For Michigan State, fix that defense, that secondary. Mike Trustle's got a challenge. How are we going to fix that thing? Harlan Barnett, maybe his absence, now a couple of years is having an impact, because I'm not seeing that Michigan State secondary, the no-fly zone, or physical guys just making you pay the price to run a passing route against Michigan. That's what I remember about Michigan State's defense in the past few years. I'm not seeing it. It's got to come back.
Such a good point. Harlan Barnett was a big part of constructing that secondary, and of course he left to become the defensive coordinator down at Florida State. So two big games coming up this upcoming Saturday. We mentioned Michigan's homecoming against number 14 Iowa. That's a noon start on Fox. We'll break that one down for you first in our midweek podcast, and then the nightcap, 7:30 down in Columbus at Ohio Stadium, the Horseshoe on ABC. The Spartans go on the road against Ohio State. And that's all we got to do is hearken back again. 4 years ago, they had no shot. They had no chance going on there. They didn't even have their starting quarterback, Connor Cook, and they made it happen. They got it done. So anything can happen. It's college football. That's why Tom and I love it so much. Once again, Michigan State escaping their own homecoming with a 40-31 win, and Michigan big winners, 52-0 over Rutgers. That'll do it for us from here for now. For Tom Crawford, I'm Ryan Schuling, going out to the sounds of the Record Lounge in Rio Town. Be sure to give them a visit if you're ever in East Lansing for a tailgate or going to Lansing on business. They're just south of 496, South Washington, in the Rio Town Marketplace. New music every Friday and all the old-time greats as well. Have a great week, everybody.